Hey everybody, it's Trevor here with the channel where every day is range day, and in this week's video we're going to be doing a quick review of the wide wedges from Tier 1 Concealed. Let's check it out. Alright everybody, and just to keep in line with Chandler's video from last week on the 4 fundamental rules of firearm safety, we are of course clear, and we'll be keeping the firearm pointed in a safe direction throughout the video. Now getting into it, of course, we're going to be doing a quick review on the foam concealment wedges from Tier 1 Concealed that you can see here on my light bearing holster. If you've been keeping up with the channel for the past year or so, you'll know that I have them on my old Tier 1 Concealed holster without the light. These are the normal width wedges that I did a sizing guide on and also a review for initially. I have a couple of the wedges from the sizing pack left over here. And of course, as you can see, the wide wedges, when compared to the normal ones, are a good bit thicker. The normal wedges are 1 inch in width and the wide wedges are 1.5 inches. They will maintain the same starting thickness no matter you get a large in the original or a large in the wide, which is what I have on this holster. And much like the original wedges, they will start to wear down and compress slightly as you wear your holster more. This is more of a conforming to your body than actual wear and tear on the wedge itself. It's kind of supposed to do this, and it actually helps aid in the comfort. I haven't worn my wide wedge quite as much as the original one here, so it's not nearly as compressed, but there's also another reason for that you should consider when choosing a size. Since you have a wider wedge on your holster, the force or the weight of your rig pushing against yourself when you have everything in there is distributed over a wider area. That force divided over the larger area results in less overall pressure on the foam, so it will deform to a lesser amount than the normal wedge. You can see a side by side of the deformation here. This is a medium wedge on my original holster and a large on the light bearing holster. In terms of review, this isn't exactly a positive or a negative, but more of a consideration when it comes to sizing these wedges. As I discussed in my sizing guide video, I originally sized myself with this medium wedge based on its undeformed thickness. And again, later as I found out, as you wear the wedges, they will compress a little bit and mold to your body just a little bit more, reducing that thickness. So I would have recommended a size up based on the actual width that you are sizing yourself for. The wedge will shrink down just a little bit and you'll end up falling right in line with the size you measured. That being said, I kind of got used to the medium on this holster and it's worked out pretty well for me, but if I had to start over again, I probably should have put a large on here based on the distance that I had measured for what I wanted the concealment to be like. But if you're sizing the original wedges based on the space that you want the wedge to push your holster into your body, measure the distance and then pick a size up, and the deformation caused over time will cause you to fall right in line with the next size down. This is not so much the case with the wide wedges. Again, the force is distributed over a larger area, so the net deformation on the wedge is a bit less. So that means they're basically a bit more true to size in their undeformed state. Again, I've sized up and put a large on this, thinking it would be just about the same as my old holster with the original wedge, but over time the deformation has indeed been a lot less, again thanks to that wider area. So in short, if you are sizing yourself for a wide wedge instead of the original and you are measuring the distance that you would like to push the firearm into your body and comparing that to the wedge thickness, go pretty true to size. It might deform just a little bit, but it won't be enough that would warrant you picking another size up to account for that. And on the topic of sizing, another thing that Tier 1 Concealed has more recently added to their website is complete dimensions for all their wedges. The original reason I made the sizing guide video is because Tier 1 Concealed would sell small, medium, large, extra large original wedges, and that was all they would give you. They wouldn't tell you how big this small wedge actually was or how big this large wedge actually was. So you could either play the lottery and just guess which one might sound right for you, or you'd have to buy all 4 of them for a little bit more money and then you'd have a bunch extra left over. But now Tier 1 has those listed on the website, so you should have no trouble selecting the size wedge that is just right for you. Moving on from there into the actual performance of the wide wedge itself, I have been extremely happy with its performance on the light bearing holster model. Again, I have my Glock 19 here as my everyday carry gun with the Enforce Wild 2 weapon light. This is a full-size weapon light, so it extends past the muzzle a good bit, and the holster itself has a much wider footprint than my original Tier 1 holster here that does not have the light compatibility. The light portion of the holster sticks out a whole lot more in this direction, and it also extends further down. When I first got the holster and didn't have the wide wedge on there, the additional length of the light down here would cause a bit of a hot pressure spot when I had the holster on, and it would become kind of uncomfortable after wearing it for a couple hours. Putting the wedge on here instead lifts that little hot spot of the end of the flashlight off of you, and instead you just feel the soft foam against your body. It's definitely an addition I would recommend to people looking to carry in the appendix position with a full-size light and a gun that's a bit larger than a subcompact. And I definitely couldn't imagine carrying anything bigger than the Glock 19 without one of these wedges and a full-size light. If you have a smaller light, you might be able to get away with a thinner wedge, but with the Glock 19 and the full-size light, that wide wedge provides just a little bit more extra coverage and leverage on you to really alleviate some of the discomfort that might be associated with that. In terms of durability, this wedge is held up just as well as any of the other ones. The slick vinyl backing on the back of the wedge is held up just fine. It's held its shape as it's molded to my body, and there are no tears, rips, or any other deformations from taking the holster on and off, wearing it in hot or cold, anything like that. It is a fairly simple product, so there's not too much that can go wrong, but the core pieces of it still remain intact. The foam hasn't crumpled, stiffened, or hardened. It's maintained its original durability and rigidity. None of the adhesive has peeled or come off, even along the thinner backing here that could be more susceptible to peeling. And overall, it's just held up pretty great. Price-wise, the original wedges, I believe, are $5 a piece, and the wides come in at around $6.50 or so. So they're still really cheap and not a huge difference price-wise. And again, the only thing to really look out for is the sizing compared to the original. If you stepped up like I did from a original width wedge to the wide width wedge and figured you would size yourself the same way for the type of wedge, just remember that you should probably stay more true to size with the distance you measure and not have to account for the deformity as much. Again, the wider width helps with that. The other thing that I might add about the wide wedges is that being 1.5 inches in width, smaller, more subcompact guns, think the SIG P365 or something a little smaller like that, the holsters may not have enough room on them to comfortably accommodate this wedge. It is quite wide at the end of the day, and we're starting to get into some of the smaller guns that are becoming more and more popular to carry these days. Maybe the wide wedge isn't always a super good fit for that. The smaller slide and barrel width on those subcompact or micro compact holsters might not accommodate the 1.5 inch width very well, and then trying to cram one of these on a holster that's already pretty small would kind of defeat the purpose of carrying a smaller gun just for the sake of reducing printing. Of course, you could go with a bit thinner wedge to kind of accommodate for that, but if you're carrying something a bit more on the smaller side, and especially in the appendix position, I would recommend the original width wedge. Should be more than adequate. But overall, these wide boys here have done an excellent job at making this light bearing Tier 1 concealed holster a good bit more comfortable. The light down here kind of started to dig into me, especially when I was sitting down more with this, just due to the added width and length on the holster. And this wedge puts just enough pressure over that wider area afforded to you by the light and makes everything a whole lot more comfortable for extended use in the holster. Again, I would recommend a foam wedge on any type of appendix rig that you're carrying, be it the light bearing model, one that's not light compatible like my original holster here, be it a compact or more of a full-size firearm holster, all the way down to sub or micro compact. There's just no getting around the benefits that they offer, and it just adds a bit more comfortability, which everyone's always looking after. On a bit more of the practical side, again, they do sort of act as a fulcrum down here to push the weapon into your body a bit more, which of course helps with printing. I would only really recommend the wide size wedges on something like a Glock 19 or bigger. Any smaller than this and you really just don't need the width, and you might even have trouble squeezing it on the holster. I would pretty much consider it the go-to if you have a light bearing model holster, as the extra width of the light allows you to fit more of a wedge on here, and this just makes life a bit more comfortable and you're not having quite as much pressure pushed onto you by the wedge. And again, be sure to keep in mind that a lot of my experiences and feedback based on this particular setup with this holster, this wedge width, this particular firearm, it all relates back to my own body type and posture and just how the weapon naturally sits on my belt when I'm carrying it concealed. Your mileage could vary just a little bit on your own body type, but overall I feel like there would be a net increase in comfort and concealability if you pick the right size wedge for just about anyone. And I would absolutely recommend the wide wedges from Tier 1 Concealed if your holster has the room for it. Well, that's going to do it for the video this week, guys, on a quick review and some sizing considerations for the wide wedges from Tier 1 Concealed. I've of course been a big fan of the original width wedges on my first Tier 1 concealed holster that wasn't light bearing, and the wide wedges turned out to be a great fit for me on my light bearing holster, which has just that extra bit of real estate that makes this wedge all that more effective. If you like this video, feel free to leave a like down below in the comments, and if you have any questions about the video or would like to share your own uses or experiences with the foam wedges from Tier 1 Concealed, or maybe your own wedging system, feel free to leave them down below in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And as always, make sure to subscribe to the channel, where every day is range day. Thank you for watching.